So to help you think that through a little bit, I've made a list of 3 pilot programs that you might consider, one in each of the applications of using social media to listen, to inform, or to engage. So in the area of listening, you might want to use that to support an early study planning or feasibility or message development. You could set that up as a 30 to 60-day test, and in addition to monitoring content and activity, integrate also some online survey of the target audiences to ask some of these questions. And generally, if you were to invest in something like this, it might be in the $40,000 to $50,000 range to integrate the whole program. You could use the inform, which means coming from you as a sponsor directly out to the target patient population in a protocol-specific initiative. It'd be longer, more like a 3 to 5 months. And again, you know, you'd have the media planning and strategy, keyword development, messaging for testing, and all of the things that we use in social media, as anything else we deliver direct to patients, will go through or need to go through the regulatory bodies, both your internal and the external. And then the important part of a pilot in this area would be to monitor the results, modify certain things, and measure them again. So let's say you were willing to try something on YouTube and you wanted to compare that against a paid search program. We can monitor and tag in the responses to see, was the group that went through a YouTube video to learn a little bit more about the program better qualified? Did you have a higher rate of referral to sites from those participants? Or did you have a better response from people who came directly from a paid search advertising? So when you're piloting, we'd also want to work at defining what are the measures that we want to evaluate. And then the last example would be to do something at the engagement level. And these these are really franchise-based commitments that both take a longer time and have a greater investment and generally need the internal support of multiple studies. I think we've given you a sense of what we mean by that. So I was going to ask you for some feedback, and I might hold off on that or skip over this. We have 3 different training programs that we are developing around aspects of social media. But I want to make sure that we leave some room for questions that may come in on the phone. So I think I'll go very quickly through it, and then Marvin, if you could post these to the right-hand side on the polling. The first one is a web class, so essentially the same kind of format in a longer time frame and focusing on study planning and feasibility. It'd probably be a half-day webinar. The second is more of a certificate program looking to train people inside your organizations on how to recruit study participants through paid search, and teaching people how to evaluate options, what therapeutic areas are the most likely, keyword search strings, how to develop messages that generate response and meet the search engine and IRB requirements. And then the process of monitoring. And then the last is an online sort of social media 101, which many of you, I would hope, through today feel as if you've gotten a good bit of that. But maybe there are other people in your organization who would benefit from one of the quick trainer modules. So we'll leave that open on the right-hand side, and then I'd like to turn it over to Matt to sort of wrap it up with some conclusions and move us on to questions.
So we've learned a lot today. We've covered a lot today. Now, before we open the phone lines to any questions anyone in the audience may have, I just want to cover some of the key points from today's presentation, some key takeaways. So some things to consider. Number one, social media is just one more tool in the marketing mix. It has some important differences. It provides the opportunity to receive feedback from e-patients on either brand or disease, but also on clinical trial experiences and get a patient's perspective on that. Take advantage of social media to both listen to patients or customer base, and also to reach out. Provide them messages. Consider it a two-way conversation to learn and understand your patient base. Design your clinical trial recruitment strategies for outreach based off of this foundation that you've established from understanding your patients, and use it to understand how to best reach them and how to speak to them. Don't ignore traditional media. Remember, social media is just one in the mix of different forms of outreach, and it's often that mix of old and new tactics that's often the most effective approach. Overcoming barriers, either internally or externally, is often just a matter of educating. Providing information, and a platform for talking things out. But use what you know, use what's familiar to you. And lastly, remain open-minded. Just because something worked last time does not mean it's going to be the best choice for today. Make your optimal strategy and then pilot, or test all these new approaches when you deem appropriate. Now, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone again in joining us for this webinar, and we'd like to open the phone lines up to any questions anyone in the audience may have.
Great, thank you, Matt. And audience members, if you'd like to ask a question over the phone line, you can hit star and the number 1 on your telephone keypad at this point. Again, that's star and the number 1. You're also welcome to still type in your questions into that chat window in the lower right. You can just select all participants and then hit the send button to submit that. And we've got a lot of good questions in there throughout this webcast. So, but first of all, we'll check with our operator to see if there are any live callers at this point. Operator?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay. Again, as a reminder, that's star and the number 1 to ask a live question. And Matt, I'll maybe hand the call back over to you to see if there are any typed in questions that you may want to respond to.
Great, thanks.
I think we have one question sort of at the bottom of the chat where Ellen is asking or has some concerns about the opt-in function. And typically when we are building the place where people land after they've clicked, whether it's on a video or they've clicked into a paid search, one of the very first pages is to restate that opt-in. So we don't leave that as a passive expectation that people are reading the terms and conditions. It specifically states that this information will be shared with the study community. At this point, our organization doesn't own any community that is then resold to multiple sponsors. People who are opting in are opting into a relationship, a community, or a database that is specific to one individual sponsor. But I know there are many out there in the market that have a different approach and then consolidate all of this interest. And my appreciation of how they work is that they do go back to their patient pools and reconfirm that opt-in. If you're working in Europe, the standard is even higher for keeping that opt-in information available, and you're going to have to document that. That's also true in California in the U.S. California has much more stringent requirements, particularly for opt-in via telephone, information collected over the telephone. So it's a great question, but it's not an insurmountable problem. There are many ways to meet these criteria. Do we have any other questions, operator?
There are no questions at this time.
Well, I think that a question came up in the last presentation that I think would be important to share with everyone. The question was, how do you monitor responses to your social media effort? Now, It really depends on what you want to evaluate, but you have many options available to you. You can embed tags into your advertising, into your website, pre-screen, or to assess the number of views, clicks, responses, qualified referrals, etc. I mean, you can really see the pathway by which people get to the information that you're providing. Now, you can also use pay-per-click daily or weekly reports that are supplied through the provider to determine which ads or keywords or sites are most effective for you. That way you can shift on the fly, monitor, make mid-course corrections while you're conducting your campaign. But bottom line, you get what you pay for, essentially. And there's always a way to integrate a monitoring service into your online media or social media programs that are run. Google has some reporting functionality built into it, but it's not as robust as several other platforms that we have tested in the past and we use currently.
I guess if we have no other questions, or either through the chat or the phone, just like to thank everybody again for your participation and remind you, if you did want to print out today's presentation, yesterday we had some trouble with people not being able to do it just in a straight print function, so we'd encourage you to hit File Save and then print it from there. Again, our thanks, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Great, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's conference. Thank you for joining us, and you may now all disconnect.